One comic company that makes a real effort to present a global perspective is Fantagraphics Comics. We caught up with the folks in charge.
I'm Gary Groth. I'm one of the co-founders of Fantagraphics Books, and we started publishing comics in 1976. And what makes us different from other publishers, I think, is that we always wanted to publish the best cartooning we could find, and we wanted to treat artists like authors. And we wanted to publish a broad range of material. Yeah, we publish a book called Palestine. It's written and drawn by Joe Sacco. And Joe actually went over to Israel and visited the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, interviewed people, and immersed himself in what was going on over there a few years ago. Made a lot of notes, brought home a lot of tapes, and then transformed that into a long narrative that he wrote and drew. We published a book called Holy Cross that's written by an Irish citizen named Malachy Coney, lives in Belfast. And what he's doing is seriously trying to look at how the politics in Ireland cross-pollinate with the personal lives of the people that it affects over there. So I mean, essentially, you know, our agenda hasn't changed. We're trying to publish the best cartooning we can find by the most mature creative talents we can find.
From the jungles of Rwanda in his travel journal called ComicsTrips to the urban jungles from his latest work, The System, Peter Kuper is one artist who has global appeal.
I got started in comics from being interested in comics from when I was a kid, and then just, you know, being a real rabid fan. ComicsTrips came out of an 8-month trip that my wife and I took through Africa and Southeast Asia. And it was basically my sketchbook. It was really journal entries where I would write something down and then do a picture next to it, and that started to form into basically comics because it's sort of the language that I know. It was like a free-form comic strip. It was a way to communicate with people because I would do a drawing, let's say, and show them, and you know, that was a way to sort of bridge a language gap. Seeing these places in the world that are abstract news items, seeing them up close, you know, sort of when you talk about environmentalism or the rainforest, or, you know, seeing what it is exactly firsthand gives me a greater ability to talk about that rather than just sort of like newsy terms. Well, the system came out of living in New York, and I think I love living here because it's a little bit like traveling all the time. The cross-influence of different cultures and all that. But the seed for the system itself really came from a subway ride where I looked around the train and I wondered, where did all these people come from, and where were they going, and would they run into each other again and influence one another? And that sort of connected to this world, a world view of, you know, seeing it all being associated. And I decided to do it as basically a wordless book. That came out a bit from my travel experience because it is the idea of how to be able to tell these things that you could communicate to people anywhere in the world, give an idea of what it's like here, or, you know, to show things rather than having people say them. It just shows in a lot of ways sort of how broad the possibilities of this medium are.
In South Africa, one comic strip has entertained people and has had a definite effect on the country's politics. We were in the neighborhood and we got to talk to the creators of Adam and Eve.
Phil, how you doing? I'm Stephen Francis.
And I'm Rico.
And we're coming to you almost live from South Africa. Together we do the most popular cartoon strip in the country, Madam and Eve. The seed was planted about 7 years ago when I first came to this country. I stayed with my new in-laws. I married my wife's South African, who I met in New York City. And while I was staying there, I watched this strange occurrence every day of the madam and the maid interacting. The madam in this case was my own mother-in-law, and the maid was a lady named Florence. I got to know them both pretty well, especially and even my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law would tell me stories about what the maid did. Oh, you wouldn't believe what the maid did today.
Madam and Eve has a lot of political content. It has to have in South Africa because Madam and Eve is social satire, that's how we see it. And in South Africa, the changes and the development, the political process is so all-enveloping that you end up having politics in your cornflakes. It's unavoidable. But also when we set out to do Madam and Eve, we decided that we were trying to, actually we based ourselves loosely on Doonesbury, and we had the same intent as Doonesbury, you know, to actually see, to create a diary of South African change. That's actually what happened. We didn't set out to do that, but that's actually what happened. If we look over the last 3.5 years of our cartoon strips, you can actually follow the whole political process and the sort of the birth of the new South Africa.
Of course, some of the strips you have to understand South African politics to get the punchline, but a great many of our strips can be understood by anyone. Humor is universal. As a matter of fact, just a couple days ago, we got our first book from Denmark. Here's Madam and Eve in Danish. I could read some. The cover's called Jammen sort kaffe et par mod nu, madam. Of course, I have no idea what that means, but hey, what the heck. I think it means black coffee is in fashion now, madam. But we're very thrilled, and we hope to see Madam and Eve in a lot more countries, maybe even America soon.
We're going to dig through that big old mailbag and see what crawls out. So come on back after this.
Aaron Rothman of Ann Arbor, Michigan writes, I love the show so much that I stay home on a Friday night just to see it. Cool. I'm also writing to you about the Phil fan club some friends and I started. Well, Aaron, here's the secret Phil fan club handshake.
So a lot of people wrote back to our survey about who the dumbest superhero was. And it seems the winner is, by a comfortable margin, Matter Eater Lad. Yes, the 1960s Legion of Superheroes member who had the power to, get this, eat and digest any substance. Only the Salisbury steak in the cafeteria slowed this guy down. What a guy.
This week, what we want to know is, which superhero costume is the goofiest?
You can write us at YTV Canada, 64 Jefferson Avenue, Unit 18, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, M6K 3H3, or email us at antigravity@ytv.ca. That's antigravity. And our webpage is at www.antigrav.com.
Well, that's it. Another quick spin around the world.
Yep, the world of comics is always evolving, taking influence from country to country and improving comics globally.
It's hard to believe that someday Howard the Duck might unite the entire world. See you next time on the Anti-Gravity Room.
In search of clues to a shocking murder, a young couple becomes trapped in another dimension, a dark zone of terror where the greatest figures in the annals of horror live on. Waxwork 2: Lost in Time, tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, Sci-Fi Saturday. From the streets of L.A. to the far reaches of outer space, the hunt is on for the ferocious furballs with a bad case of the